Democrats used to believe that border security and immigration enforcement were just common sense ideas. Don't believe it? Take their word for it.
Americans are right to demand better border security and better enforcement of the immigration laws. We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked. We've had 5 million undocumented workers come over the borders. It has become an extraordinary problem.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. And we must do more to stop it.
Biden, yes or no, would you allow the cities to ignore the federal law?
No.
Any city should listen to the Department of Homeland Security. The city made a mistake not to deport someone that the federal government strongly felt should be deported.
Just because your child gets across the border, that doesn't mean the child gets to stay.
We do not think the comprehensive health care benefits should be extended to those who are undocumented workers and illegal aliens. We do not want to do anything to encourage more illegal immigration.
People say, well, why can't you stop illegal immigrants from coming here? And the number one answer we give is when they come here, they can get jobs, get benefits against the law because of fraud. Illegal immigration is wrong, plain and simple.
Open borders. You're doing away with the concept of a nation state.
Our nation, like all nations, has the right and obligation to control its borders, and no matter how decent they are, no matter their reasons, the 11 million who broke these laws should be held accountable.
For decades, these weren't controversial or radical ideas. The only thing that changed is them.
Hey. Oh, wake up, America. Good morning to the greatest country ever conceived by the mind of man. Even on the days when the data comes in and tells us something so disturbing, so counterintuitive, and so culturally damning that it forces us to re-examine everything we think we know about our society, because a brand new survey has just dropped showing that under certain conditions, women are now more likely than men to express support for political violence. Let that sink in. The group that has historically been the civilizing force, the brake pedal on social collapse, the emotional anchor of communities, is increasingly expressing sympathy for assassinations, targeted killings, and political murder. And we're going to dig into what the data actually says. What the New York Post is reporting, why social media is warping moral instincts, and how a culture of permanent outrage is producing what some are now calling, well, punitive femininity, we might call it. Then we shift to the global chessboard. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Thank you, BB for Liberty and Cecilia H for getting those rants going early. Appreciate you. Glad Jimmy Joe Patty is here on the Wake Up America show. Please do click the like button. Glad and thankful to have all of our friends hanging out with us Mondays through Fridays, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. The cat is out of the bag, Nick. I see Gers over there in the chat. Nick Gers. Happy birthday, Nick Gers. What's wrong with Nick? Good old Nick Gers. Nickety Nick. Well, we've got a great show for you today. We're going to have a lot of fun. Click the like button, the follow button if you're not already following the show, so you can get a notification on your Rumble app whenever we go live. Well, the cat is out of the bag, Nick. Mylene Salabaria with her own show on the For Liberty Network starting March 3rd, less than a month away, a brand new show. I've been working so hard behind the scenes to launch something new and exciting to grow the For Liberty Network. We go from 4 shows to now 5 shows on the Liberty Network. Cecilia, that little tip you gave, Brad, the little tip, what is that going to do? What are we going to do? Well, we're going to grow the liberty movement in the United States. We're going to grow the For Liberty Network. We're going to build this institution. Drew Van Runkle is going to help us to build this institution. And we're going to take over our government to leave everyone alone. What do you say? 5 shows on the For Liberty Network. The Wake Up America show, you're watching it right now. Liberty Tonight, starring Brian Piotr. Culturama, starring Daniela Pensac. Freedom Arcade with me and Steffi on Friday nights, members only. And then 5, Cafecito Libre. We've come a long way, baby. We've got a lot of great stuff in store for you, even more than you can even keep up with. So try and keep up. We're going to have a great show for you today, a great 2 hours. We're going to shift to the global chessboard in about 20 minutes with one of Australia's sharpest foreign policy thinkers, Tom Switzer, on whether Donald Trump's foreign policy style makes World War III more likely, or whether the real danger comes from decades of strategic delusion by Western elites, and whether Europe, in its current woke and weakened state, is still a real ally or a civilization living on borrowed time. After that, hard culture war conversation with Missouri AFP Legislative Director Camellia Peterson about the therapeutic state, the explosion of self-diagnosed mental illness, the weaponization of victimhood, and why personal responsibility is being rebranded as cruelty. And then we close with one of the strangest and most telling internet phenomena you will see all year, the rise of Chinamaxxing. Young Americans are openly romanticizing life under communist China, mocking the United States, and cosplaying as subjects of a totalitarian regime. And we're going to expose how this connects to Chinese soft power. This show is not about despair today. It's about diagnosis. You cannot fix what you refuse to name. You cannot save a civilization you are afraid to defend. So pour the Founding Flavors coffee, guy. Serve it up hot. Hit that Rumble like button, and let's go.
Take a look here. Favorite photo ID to vote. 85% of white people favor it. 82% of Latino. 76% of Black Americans favor it. So the bottom line is this. Voter ID is not controversial in this country. A photo ID to vote is not controversial in this country. It is not controversial by party, and it is not controversial by race. The vast majority of Americans agree with Nicki Minaj that, in fact, you should have a photo ID to be able to vote. So something of a non.
Did you ever think you'd hear that on CNN? The vast majority of this country agrees with Nicki Minaj on photo ID. May you live in interesting times. What a horrible thing to say. Wake up, America. Every time we talk about political violence, the culture has this lazy default setting. It must be young men, angry, disconnected, broke, incels, looking for a cause to light on fire. And yes, men do commit more violent crime. That part is real. But now we have a story that punches right through the cliches. And it comes with numbers that should make every parent, every teacher, and every normal person put down the phone and pay attention. The news hook is a New York Post column about a survey from the Network Contagion Research Institute at Rutgers. And it found under certain conditions, women are more likely than men to express support for political assassination. Women are more likely than men to say political murder can be justified. And if you're thinking that, oh, well, this just must be some weird partisan fluke, the really sinister part is it's not cleanly partisan at all. The piece says among left of center respondents, 67% expressed at least some justification for the murder of President Trump. And among right of center respondents, 54% expressed some degree of justification for assassinating New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. And the author points out the support for killing one side is correlated with support for killing the other side, which tells you this is not ideology so much as it is a broken moral compass, the generalized tolerance for political murder. And then comes the headline grabber on this story. Female respondents were about 21% more likely than males to express some justification for murdering Mamdani, and nearly 15% more likely to justify murdering Trump. So what is happening to American women? Not American women as a whole, not your mom or your wife or your sister, but a growing slice of the young, online, hyper-politicized female world that's now being socialized into a kind of performative cruelty that masquerades as virtue. The columnist who wrote this piece that I pulled this from calls this punitive femininity. What an interesting term. That phrase is going to be our flashlight this morning, because I think it names a real pathology of the age. Moral outrage becomes a license, and punishment becomes a hobby, and eventually the line between canceling someone and erasing someone starts to blur. So let's talk about the mechanism of this, how the internet turns morality into bloodlust. Now, let's be adults about this. The point is not that women are more naturally more violent. The point is that the digital ecosystem has found a way to hack what many women are socially rewarded for: moral signaling, social enforcement, and status through community approval. So the New York Post piece says the strongest predictors for tolerance for violence were heavy social media use and a sense that America is in terminal decline. So this is your recipe. You marinate people in doom. You tell them the system is rigged. You give them a feed that pays them in dopamine for shaming enemies. And then you act shocked when they start thinking an enemy is not a human being, but a symbol that must be destroyed for the tribe to heal. This is why the study finds what it finds, because the feed does not teach citizenship. It teaches purity. Your social media feeds aren't teaching you argument. It's teaching excommunication. And here's where I want you to notice the really dark little twist about this. It talks about online reactions to Luigi Mangione, a man accused of murdering United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, and how some women are treating him like a celebrity, even sexualizing him, describing him as attractive, charismatic, romantic. I mean, that is not just weird. It is deeply evil. It's revealing, too. When violence gets aestheticized, it stops being judged as right or wrong and starts being judged as meaningful or expressive, right? That is exactly how radicalization works in the age of memes. You're not signing up for a manifesto, you are buying a vibe. And the vibe for a certain online subculture is this: the world is awful, the enemy is evil, and punishment is self-care. Now, thank you, Entropy Nomad, for your sweet, sweet dollarinos. Women brought us into this world, and they can take us out. Ah. Do the Maury Povich. Ah. And if you are a libertarian or a conservative or right-winger, you should see the trap here, because this is a culture of feelings over facts, feelings overriding rights. It's the endpoint of politics that treats disagreement as violence and then uses that as a permission to answer disagreement with violence. And then once you get there, it doesn't matter if you're left or right, because the operating system of all of this, what this functions on, is total nihilism. And nihilism is an equal opportunity Grim Reaper. Now let's zoom out, because many of you may have read the thesis that was proposed by Helen Andrews recently about the great feminization of society. This is where that story becomes the perfect lens to view this. In her essay, The Great Feminization, Andrews argues something that makes people uncomfortable on purpose, that much of what we call wokeness is not some new Marxist spell. It's a feminine group dynamic applied at scale inside institutions that have tipped demographically. So she uses the Larry Summers Harvard episode as a symbolic turning point, where the response was not a normal scientific argument, but a moral and emotional mob energy. And her big claim is about methods. So women as groups tend to avoid open conflict and instead use social enforcement, ostracism, reputation, consensus, shaming, the slow death of someone standing in the community. Now, you can disagree with Helen on this. In fact, a Washington Post column by Megan McArdle engages that whole frame through the idea of toxic femininity and cancel culture. But whether you love Andrews' thesis or hate her, here's why she matters for this story. The survey result of this poll of more women favoring political violence than men, the survey looks like an escalation in this same toolkit. Women have been hacked. Their natural biological desires have been hacked by their social feeds. The cancel culture is punishment without due process. It is a social death sentence. And what happens when you spend years training people that punishment is virtue, that banishment is healing, that your enemy is a contagion? Well, eventually some people start thinking the most perfect cancel is not losing your job, it is losing your life. That's the horror movie arc. And the big point that I want to make from a libertarian perspective, though, is that a society that cannot tolerate speech will eventually justify force. If you treat words as violence, you will treat violence as justice. So that is the inversion. That is the rot. That is the evil. And it's why I do not care which party you are. I care whether you are raising a generation that can hear a bad opinion without demanding blood. Now, let's put some harder measurements under this vibe. What's the data backbone, right? Because I don't want this to just be a vibes monologue. We have a well-documented gender gap in politics, and it has real-world consequences in culture, in our friendships, and in dating, which then feeds back into politics. Again, I think most of the people that I've lost as friends in the last 10 years, almost all of them have been female who've been radicalized. Right. Pew has documented a consistent partisan gender gap, with men more likely to identify Republican, women more likely to identify Democrat. Gallup has also noted women have moved more left over the long run, while men have been more stable. And then you look at young people specifically. The Harvard Institute of Politics Youth Poll has found this detail that sounds like a small thing, but it's not. A majority of young women say political agreement is important in a romantic relationship more than young men do. So you see what that means. It means that politics is no longer just an issue. It is an identity filter for love and belonging. And once politics is a relationship filter, disagreement is not a policy argument. It's a moral threat, a signal that the other person is not safe, not good, not worthy. Right? That's how you get a culture where punishment feels moral. And on top of that, you have all this digital immersion going on. The New York Post column, the NCRI material, they both emphasize social media heaviness as a key predictor of assassination justification. So if you're trying to build a thoughtful explanation, it's this triangle. So identity politics as personality, social media as the reinforcement machine, and declinism as the emotional fuel. We're in decline. Social media is reinforcing this. Identity politics is your personality, right? And I want to say this is not women becoming monsters. This is the machine taking people who are often highly conscientious, highly social, and highly moralistic, and turning that moral energy into a weapon against society. It's why the columnist that I pulled this from, the New York Post piece, can say something like, women have historically played a stabilizing role in civic life. That is true. And the fact that some now show greater tolerance for political murder is a signal that the moral climate itself is deteriorating. Now, here's the thing. Rush Limbaugh used to say, feminazis and people would clutch their pearls like he just hit him with a chair. But the point was not that women are Nazis. His point was that a certain ideological feminism had become authoritarian. It wanted control, it wanted enforcement, it wanted punishment for heresy. And in the digital age, that authoritarian impulse does not even need an institution. It just needs a hashtag and a mob. Right? This is not about hating the new incentive structures that turn human relationships into status warfare. Andrew's argument about institutions becoming more feminized and then adopting more consensus form and less open debate, that tracks with what we have watched happen in media, academia, HR, and corporate culture. So McCardle's column in the Washington Post literally uses the phrase toxic femininity in the context of cancel culture. Again, you can disagree with the labels, but the behavior patterns are observable. You must have seen this, guys. Indirect aggression, social sanctions, reputation destruction, and leaderless pile-ons, right, amplified by social media platforms. It looks like something is mutated. The social sanction instinct is getting supercharged into a fascination with violent resolution. Not all women, but a sufficiently loud online minority that moves survey numbers and moves headlines. So if you're looking for what to do with that, you start with a heresy in 2026. Bring back moral clarity, right? It's wrong to talk about like murdering your political opponents, right? It's wrong to do that. How do we de-radicalize? I don't know. I don't have time to finish that because I've got a fantastic guest coming up at the Wake Up America show in 5 minutes from now. Tom Switzer talking about the new geopolitical map. We're going to do a little foreign policy chat before we get back to Camellia, and Camellia is going to tell us why your mental illness is not my problem. No, seriously. Just, if you're self-diagnosed, shut the up. All right? Shut the book. If you're self-diagnosed. Otherwise, it's okay. Otherwise, shut the book. We'll be right back. It's the Wake Up America show on the For Liberty Network.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back, with sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
You talked about the weapon, the discombobulator.
What discombobulator? Well, I'm not allowed to talk about it.
But what does it do?
Let me just tell you, you know what it does? None of their equipment works. That's what it does. Everything was.
How does it?
It was my name. I'm very proud of the name. Everything was discombobulated. It was, practically a shot wasn't. They were ready.
Right.
And when we came, they couldn't do anything.
You saw this on the video. You could tell.
Tom, it discombobulated everything.
Nothing worked, even including humans.
Well, let's
it knocks
put it
the
this
humans
way.
out.
We lost no equipment and a very strong, and they're good fighters, great fighters.
You discombobulated everything. All right, guys, it's time to talk foreign policy. Let's get an expert on that. Today's guest, Tom Switzer, currently host of the Switzerland podcast, co-editor with Sue Bank of Prudence and Power, the writings of Owen Harries. Tom is one of the few commentators who has been consistently analyzing how foreign policy realities are shifting, not just in Washington, but across Europe and Asia, and how leadership personalities and demographics are driving strategic outcomes. In his recent columns, he argues that Trump's second presidency is not like past administrations, that his foreign policy is ad hoc, unstable, and risks unintended conflict, and that America's traditional allyship with Europe is fracturing under strategic reality and a new multipolar world. We're going to explore all of that, what it means for U.S. national interests. Tom, welcome to the Wake Up America show. Thanks so much for joining us at, a little past midnight there in Sydney.
Lovely to be with you, Austin.
Delighted to have you here today. So, Tom, in your recent piece, you argue that this enduring myth is that Donald Trump is an isolationist, yet his actions, like strikes in Yemen, pressure on Iran, intervention in Venezuela, paint a very different picture. So how do you reconcile this apparent contradiction, and what do you think it says about the instinct that's driving Trump's foreign policy?
Well, I think his natural instinct, Austin, is, as he said on the campaign trails in both 2016 and 2024, America first, that he wanted to reorder American priorities away from the kind of nation building and regime change policies that defined American foreign policy after the 9/11 September, the terrorist attacks on September 11. And I think he resonated with the war-weary people who were sick and tired of fighting what he called forever wars. So that's his instincts. But of course, the Republican Party is very divided on foreign policy, as you well know, between people who support Trump, the so-called MAGA movement. But then there are remnants of the old neoconservative establishment, if you like, in the Republican Party who still believe that America has a special mission to uphold world order and promote democracy around the world. And I think in a way his administration is a bit divided between those two schools of thought, and that explains the inconsistencies. That's my sense, at least.
Okay, so what do you think the risks are of this approach?
Well, in the most recent article, I make the point that Trump is a pugnacious temperament, and he has a visceral attitude towards American interests and honor, as he sees it, and that can be a very combustive mixture. And given that, it could be the easiest thing in the world for an adversary to taunt him out of his own natural sense of restraint and recognition of limits. And who knows where we might end up. But so far, he hasn't really got bogged down into the kind of unwinnable wars or quagmires that some detractors have feared he might do. He's been more interested in the pinpricks, the operations, the short-term operations like the Venezuela operation that dislodged Nicolas Maduro, or the 12-day war over Iran in June, July. So far, so good, but there's always a danger that a risk or a risk or an accident or miscalculation could just blow things up, and that's the danger here.
Tom, do you think that part of this is, and this is not just meant to be a criticism of the West outside of the United States, but do you think that some of this is possible just a miscalculated read of what Trump is really doing? I mean, we had Richard Nixon in the 1970s who legitimately played what we call the crazy bastard strategy. And I know that overseas there's this sort of idea that Americans are stupid and we eat cheeseburgers and we're fat and obese. But Donald Trump's actions in Venezuela, I think, really demonstrated to the world the competence of the United States and of the American military. So is it possible, though, Tom, that all of this, that like your interpretation of this is something ad hoc, could be actually could be deliberate on Trump's part, and he's pretending to be a crazy bastard in order to throw all of you guys off so we can get better trade deals?
Yeah, I think that's a plausible case can be made in defense of your argument, Austin. And look, don't get me wrong, I think his instincts are right. I don't think that we're living in a unipolar moment the way we did after the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Empire in the 1990s. That was a term coined by the late neoconservative commentator Charles Krauthammer. The world's becoming more multipolar with the rise of China, the resurgence of Russia, and really the emergence of India as a major player. But the United States is still the most powerful country in the world, and that won't change in the next 3 years. All this nonsense that you'll hear from Democrats and the left that America has declined dramatically as a result of Donald Trump's foreign policy, it's nonsense. America is still energy independent. It exercises preeminence in all the three major theatres, the Persian Gulf, Europe, and East Asia. And Trump, quite rightly, wants to just reinvigorate the Monroe Doctrine that, it's been in place since 1823, when the United States was the most powerful nation in the hemisphere and sought to impose its will and leadership across its hemisphere, like virtually all great powers in history have done. The question you have to ask yourself is, what out of those three other major hemispheres will the United States focus on? And in my judgment, and I think this is Trump's position, it's not going to be Europe. It's probably not going to be the Persian Gulf. It's more likely going to be in East Asia, because that's where America faces a peer competitor in China.
Well, I think I might disagree with the premise that the United States is facing a more multipolar world, and I'm willing to change my mind if you could respond to this, because I actually think that the black bagging of Maduro overnight and of the tense negotiations over Greenland demonstrate quite clearly that we're not going to be living in a multipolar world in the future, because the United States, no matter what instincts for isolationism might exist here, the United States very much is committed to acting as policemen of the world, whether I agree with it or you agree with it or whatever instincts Trump might have. But the United States has always engaged in expansionism and in adding land to the empire. Eventually, Cuba will probably fall into. They already exist in the orbit, as you said, under the Monroe Doctrine. Cuba will eventually fall, probably become a state. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but maybe our children's lifetimes. So there will probably be a 51st, 52nd state. Maybe it'll be Greenland. But how will China or Russia? I mean, Russia, I think you had even said, is something of a paper tiger. China is the real conflict. So I mean, how does China become multi-power? It seems to me that China, to some extent, is also a paper tiger, because they have to claim to be a near Arctic power. The United States, we just take what we want and do as we please. And if China tries to get a little bit too uppity, they're also surrounded. They don't. And as you said in your columns, Russia and China historically do not have the kinds of positive relations that would steer them into a natural alliance, despite them being close. So how can you argue that the United States is looking at a multipolar world? We pretty much do what we want. Who's going to stop us?
I suppose that Russia did invade a sovereign state in Ukraine. Now, I would argue that was driven in response to NATO expansion that upset Russia's strategic sensibilities, but that hasn't happened in Europe since Nazi Germany in World War II. So Russia has become assertive in Ukraine. It's probably going to take 20% of Ukraine. So that didn't happen before 2014 when the Russians went into Crimea. And as for China, they have been busily militarizing much of the South China Sea, and to a lesser extent the East China Sea, and they are increasingly intimidating Taiwan. That's not in America's national interest, I don't think. And I think this is a real concern for the United States in East Asia. Yes, it has a lot of allies like Australia, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Thailand. China doesn't have any real allies. It's got a few client states, if you like Cambodia, maybe North Korea.
They're surrounded.
Yeah, but China now is a powerful country. It's not as powerful as the United States, but it's, if you go back to the early 1990s and the Trump administration's national security statement made this very clear, the United States represented, 22 to 25% of global GNP. Europe at the time represented more or less the same. Europe today is about 14%. It's declined dramatically. The United States is still very high at 22 to 25%, but it's China that's rising. China's now in the late teens, early 20s. So it's catching up. And yes, on a military basis, the United States has something like 11, maybe 12 aircraft carriers, whereas China only has 3. But China, as its economy is growing, and it has grown dramatically in the last 30 years, it's converting those economic assets into strategic assets, and China will start to seek a sphere of influence in East Asia on which its future prosperity and security depend. The problem for China, though, is that the United States is in the way, so you're going to have a really intense geopolitical security competition, the likes of which we have not seen since the Cold War, Austin.
No, you make good points, and I'm definitely considering your thoughts there. But you place China as the primary strategic threat to U.S. interests. I think I agree with you there. So, what are your thoughts on how the United States should balance deterrence without engaging in open alliances that might drag us into endless foreign commitments? The United States doesn't want to get involved in another land war. Your thoughts?
No. Well, look, I'm a foreign policy realist. My heroes are people like John Mearsheimer from the University of Chicago, Hans Morgenthau, also from the University of Chicago, and to a lesser extent, Henry Kissinger, the academic realists who believe that insecurity and conflict are inevitable byproducts of the international system, and that deterrence can contain rising powers. And so I think what the United States is doing, and I think this is generally a bipartisan position in Washington, it's probably one of the few bipartisan issues in Washington, is a support for a strong deterrence policy in East Asia. So there's the AUKUS agreement with Great Britain and Australia, where they exchange nuclear submarines, or the United States provides nuclear submarines to Australia to help monitor China in the East and South China Seas. There's the Quad relationship, which is a security relationship between Japan, India, the United States, and Australia. There are, of course, the 5 main security treaty allies that I mentioned before. And all this is designed to hedge against China and send a message to China that if they think about making a move on Taiwan or escalating their military ambitions in East China, they will meet a deterrence. And I think that's the best strategy. We don't want a war with China, but we want to make sure that China recognizes that if they overstep the line, they will meet resistance.
We're speaking to Tom Switzer this morning. We just crossed 100 live viewers, and I imagine it's because of that handsome blonde Aussie speaking over there on my right. He is joining us live from Sydney, Australia, where it is just past midnight. Jimmy Joe Patty over in the chat says China has more biolabs in the United States than we have biolabs in China. Well, that you know of, Jimmy Joe Patty. We can talk about that another time. But Tom, I would like to talk about your argument that Trump's behavior and rhetoric, have contributed to European mistrust. Do you think that Europeans underestimate the level of frustration that Americans that are geopolitically aware have towards our European allies and the amount of contributions that we make to the defense of Europe, while sort of being deeply scorned by European society and culture, which, like I said earlier, sees us as stupid, fat, obese Americans? And on some level, I what I'm trying to articulate, Tom, and I'd love to have you respond to it, is that Donald Trump seems to represent, to some extent, the frustration that the United States has with being the sugar mama of the world, while having while sort of being spit in the faces of by European elites who see us as nothing more than writing a blank check for their security, while simultaneously insulting us and talking about how great their socialized healthcare is while we foot their bill. Because of course money is fungible. If we weren't paying for your defense and you had to build armies and air forces, then we might be able to pay for our own healthcare. So do you think that Donald Trump, do you think that some Europeans, they just turn their noses up at Donald Trump, but they fail to see that he represents a contingent of Americans who are deep down very frustrated with our allies?
Well, I mean, the point you have to remember about US-Europe relations is the history, and that suggests that Washington's commitment to Europe has surfaced only when core US interests are threatened. And I make this argument in the piece I wrote for The Spectator magazine. 1917, with German submarine warfare, that dragged America into World War I. Pearl Harbor and then Hitler's foolish declaration of war on the United States in 1941, that dragged Roosevelt and the Americans into World War II. And then, of course, the Soviet threat, the very real Soviet threat in the late 1940s, that justified the creation of NATO. And that Soviet threat in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, Cold War, justified the very close security relationship between the United States and Europe. But what happened in the late 80s, early 1990s? The fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Empire. And in response to that, the US foreign policy establishment, Republicans and Democrats alike, believed that America should be, as the sole remaining superpower, the top dog, the global hegemon that would impose its will and leadership across the globe. But one brave Republican stood against that consensus, and his name was Patrick J. Buchanan, who ran as a Republican on an America First platform against George H.W. Bush in 1992. He was the president. He lost those primaries. And then 4 years later against Bob Dole in 1996, he lost those primaries. But Buchanan's America First agenda primarily was about America getting out of Europe. And it's been 35 years since the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. Remember, communism united America and Europe. It's been 35 years. And I say, just as an objective observer, more power to Donald Trump for telling the Europeans, you guys have to do more for your defense and stop sponging off American taxpayers.
Europe isn't our ally, says Steph793 in the chat. They want us destroyed by Muslims too. This is perhaps an insensitive way to talk about the deep concern that America has about the mass immigration into Muslim countries. Of course, recently culminated into the tragic shooting at Bondi Beach. When are Europeans going to wake up to the threat of radical Islam and mass immigration, Tom?
Europe's in a real bind. I mean, they're in a demographic death spiral all across Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, Western Europe. Their fertility rates are very low. They're in serious economic decline. They haven't really advanced technologically compared to the United States and China. And of course, strategically, they've been sponging off the United States. So when that day comes, when the Americans eventually do withdraw from NATO, and I'm not saying that Trump will do that, but nevertheless, as the momentum is there, then what's Europe going to do? You could make the argument the only thing saving them is immigration to make up for their declining fertility rates. But a lot of Muslims, compared to, say, other ethnic groups, in Europe, all the available evidence indicates they don't integrate very well because they bring their conservative Muslim cultural mores to the situation. And this is especially relevant when it comes to the equality of the sexes, where conservative Muslims just don't treat women with much respect. And then you get a blowback and there's a clash of civilizations taking place in Europe. I mean, the Trump administration was mocked in its national security statements for saying that Europe was in civilizational decline, but all the evidence points to that, Austin.
It's a deep shame because, Tom, I think that Americans still hold nostalgia for the alliances that helped us to win World War II and shape the post-war order. But it does feel as if those alliances are drifting or have drifted. And maybe Patrick Buchanan was right. Maybe Ron Paul was right that it would be better for the United States to stand alone. To some extent, Trump's naked self-dealings when it comes to the interests of the United States are deeply American, and it's refreshing because it's out in the open. There's not this sort of posturing at the United Nations, if you will.
But also just some history here. European commentators seem to think that Donald Trump's an aberration. That, oh my gosh, the United States and Europe have been perfect partners since time immemorial, and here's this ignoramus Trump blowing up the relationship. It's absolute nonsense. People forget that in 1946, a year after the US, French, British, Russian victory over the Nazis, Harry Truman, a Democrat, ruthlessly withdrew Lend-Lease aid to Britain and Western Europe. And then in 1956, right at the height of the Cold War, it was the Eisenhower administration that pulled the financial rug beneath Britain to force Anthony Eden's government to halt its ill-fated invasion of Egypt. And that just compelled Britain to reorder its own strategic priorities. So the idea that this is all Donald Trump's fault, it's an absolute hogwash.
Tom Switzer, writer of The Spectator. You've written some great pieces lately. I highly recommend our listeners read your pieces that inspired us to have you on the show, and we're grateful that you would stay up so late and join us. Over here, it's still early. There, it's very late. But do us a favor before we go. If there's anything that you think we missed that you would like to point out, or perhaps you have a website you'd like to plug or something you'd like to share before we let you go, I'll give you the last word.
Well, thank you very much. Look, I've just created a podcast. It's on YouTube called Switzerland with Tom Switzer. And our first episode actually was released just a day or so after the Venezuela operation. And I had two competing views. John Bolton, of course, a former Trump advisor, versus John Mearsheimer from the University of Chicago. And much to my amazement, it attracted 185,000 views before YouTube shut us down, because they feared that Mearsheimer and Bolton were artificial intelligence, which they weren't.
No. I think you need to join us over here on Rumble, where all of the free speech still exists. We appreciate you, Tom, and thank you for your great writing and being so generous with your time. Have a
My pleasure,
day.
Austin. Thanks so much.
Yeah, good night, friend.
More women, she says, are against free speech.
When you ask people, which do you value more, academic freedom, there's no overlap. A vast majority of males choose the pursuit of truth, academic freedom, whatever the cost. The females favor emotional safety and equity.
So what? Both are good qualities.
No, they're not. The university exists for the pursuit of truth.
Men and women, she says, should fight this trend.
It's going to take more parents willing to stand up for their sons who are getting screwed at academic institution after academic institution. It's going to take more CEOs not to be browbeaten by their wives.
By their wives?
Females are overwhelmingly far more left-wing, and they push their husbands to buy into the poison of identity politics.
We have to get gender equality here in the United States. It is imperative, and there are several barriers that hold women back. And we have to really, if we're going to bring women up, we have to invest in things to help them with their power and their influence.
So why is that?
I need the Larry David da, 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 with that slow camera push in there. Hold on, with Bill Gates looking there like he needed to make sure that she took her antibiotics for the day right there. Da, 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 da. Hey guys, thank you very much, St. Selma, for your generous contribution. It's lovely to see you here today. Today's a great day to visit the Griff Shop. Go to thegriffshop.com and buy yourself a box of our delicious Founding Flavors coffee. Even if it's past midnight in Sydney, Australia, you can still drink our decaf coffee, our Betsy Ross Liberty Lullaby. Well, the culture of victimhood is eating the country alive. Every bad day is now a diagnosis. Every personal failure is a disorder, and a growing number of people are being told they're helpless, broken, and entitled to medication instead of discipline. When we come back, I'm joined by Camellia Peterson to talk about a viral essay that says what millions of normal people are thinking, but few are allowed to say out loud. Life is hard. Get up anyway. Stay right there. Your mental illness is not my problem. It's the Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways? Do you believe that aliens controlled LBJ to assassinate John F. Kennedy? Did you know that the shot can put chemicals in you that will make you more sensitive to 5G? Do you love America? Do you want more freedom? Do you like smoking hot red-headed libertarians? Then the AP for Liberty shop is for you! Check out all the awesome new merch.
Now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
But what would you say to people who feel like they haven't gotten justice, Mr. President?
Something that people care about. Yeah, what did you say?
What would you say to the survivors who feel like they haven't gotten justice?
You are the worst reporter. No wonder CNN has no ratings because of people like you. You know, she's a young woman. I don't think I've ever seen you smile. I've known you for 10 years. I don't think I've ever seen a smile on your face.
I'm asking you about survivors.
You know why you're not smiling? Because you know you're not telling the truth. And you're a very dishonest organization, and they should.
Why don't you smile more, baby? Welcome to the Wake Up America Show. I'm Austin Peterson. One of the most read culture pieces of the week is a blunt essay by writer Megan Murphy titled, "I am tired of your mental illness." I think Donald Trump is expressing that same frustration we all feel to that CNN chick. The core argument is simple. Everyday struggles have been rebranded as permanent diagnoses, and that shift is making people weaker, more dependent, and less capable of basic adult function. Murphy argues anxiety, sadness, distraction, stress, they've always been part of our human condition, but our culture now treats them as disabilities instead of challenges to overcome. So this conversation cuts straight through culture, policy, the future of work, education, self-government. Joining me now to dig in is Camellia Peterson. She is a longtime voice for personal responsibility and limited government. Camellia, good to see you.
Good morning.
Camellia, are you mentally ill?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it depends on who you ask.
You go on this show twice a week, so talk to us about this piece. You called this to my attention, and I was like, oh, that's it. That's gold. What's it about?
Yeah, so I mean, the title caught my eye, scrolling through the other day. I don't know where it popped up, and it was like, I am tired of your mental illness. And I was like, same,
yes,
me too.
Yes.
And it's so funny because, and the sidebar, like with the opening clip you played from Trump, like I could totally see this Megan Murphy, like also just like Trump telling women to smile more.
Smile more, baby. Come on. I don't think I've ever seen you smile. Because they're mentally ill. They're angry. They're hostile. They're mentally ill. I mean, maybe some actually are, but the rest of them are just faking it.
Well, I mean, we have set up, this, we have this society in this context where, everybody can take care of you. And so, you can be a little wilting lily and, if you feel sad on some day, well, you've got to get a diagnosis for it so you can get some medicine for it and, DoorDash your meals because you don't feel like going out for it. This makes me crazy because I think we've seen this rise in fad mental illness is really what it is, in recent years. And it's so detrimental to people who really do struggle with mental illness. And it's terrible because it minimizes the very real impact that it can have whenever you just trivialize it with, I don't feel good today or my life's not going like I think it should. So, woe is me. And, I need you to help me for everything.
Well, we've lionized victimhood and disability. If you have a disability, then people all of a sudden treat you better. So faking a disability, a mental illness is one of the easiest things there is. One of my favorite stories from the social media slop pile, Camellia, is this chick who pretended for years that she had Tourette's, and she got outed because she would do the most ridiculous behavior. But it was because there's an incentive in our culture to be mentally ill, and that's a problem, isn't it?
Sure. And I think, this is kind of one of the outcomes of the internet and, our digital society is because it's so much easier to get validation for, every little thing. And it gets you attention, and attention is currency. So, when you're online and you're putting all this out there and people are feeling sorry for you and they're giving you that attention and, trying to be helpful and empathetic. And all it does is it creates a cycle of it being, it has to get bigger and worse all the time. And so then you have people competing in a way, for this attention, and they've got to have the latest illness, whatever that may be. And there have been many iterations.
There are so many people who do this, who fake mental illness, that it has become an actual meme. So I've got pulled up on the screen right now, faking Tourette's TikTok cringe compilation. So right now what the audience is seeing are women with green hair pretending to be mentally ill, sticking their faces into bags over and over again. You know, basically, I don't know if you've ever seen Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo, the movie with Rob Schneider, but in it he dates a woman with Tourette's.
No.
And she's screaming like a banshee, like a psychopath. But real mental illness is not something to be celebrated, Camellia. I mean, I'm not saying that you should necessarily be shunned unless you're like a violent psychopath, in which case, yeah, you should be shunned. But certainly Camellia, we shouldn't be, I don't know, celebrating it. It does feel like there's like a level of celebration of it. Like there's supposed to be a flag and a parade. Sure. Okay, well, yeah. Same way that we have a flag and a parade for people who are in wheelchairs who don't have legs, but you know, we pity them. We don't say, oh, well, you know, maybe some of them are heroes, but not everybody. The people who are pretending to have a mental illness, you know, need to be separated from the herd.
Yes, I mean, like the people who actually struggle with, you know, real serious mental illness, it's not a joke to them. And can you imagine how insulting it must be to see all of these other people who are just faking it, and you know, because you actually deal with it. I've been reading Ben Sass's book, The Vanishing American Adult, and it really goes through and talks about how that, how we've just so infantilized. We've talked about this before. We've an infantilized thing, but it's this delay of adulthood, where this delay of responsibility and growing up and dealing with hard things and not having, like, you don't have the way paved for you so that, you know, if you fall down, you don't, you know, bump your elbow, right? I mean, that's not the role of parents to do, to make a cushion for every fall. So we haven't taught kids to have resilience and to be able to cope with bad situations and bad times. We're all going to have, you know, times in our lives that, you know, are not good, and some are really terrible. And it's that resilience that you have to learn as a child, starting with those little things that we don't allow kids to learn anymore in the name of safety and other things. You know, they don't develop that resilience into adulthood. And I think that's what we're seeing now.
Listen to this.
You legally have to give me a month.
No, I don't, because you haven't paid one brown penny.
I'm not obligated to, and I can't afford to.
Guess what? Doesn't matter.
You can't just tell me I have 2 weeks to find somewhere.
You've had over a month. And
no, I haven't.
Look, you have done nothing but dig your heels in and try and make me feel bad about your...
No, I haven't. I've been trying to educate you.
No, your education is brainwashing.
No, it's not. You just won't listen to me.
No, I'm not going to listen to this crap. Now you talk.
I have schizophrenia.
I don't care what you have. I don't. It doesn't mean we live in squalor.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean you're a bully.
I'm not even a bully. You literally detonate me, misgender me, and tell me that, like...
These people are real, Camellia.
Was that her mother?
Her mother, yeah. Says get 2 weeks to get out.
I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, wow, mom is trying to put her foot down way too late.
Yeah.
This should have started a very long time ago.
Yeah. Yesterday, Hazel, almost 2 years old. She'll be 2 years old here in a few months. Yesterday, she went over to the bookshelf. She loves books. And she went over to Dad's bookshelf yesterday, and she pulled out the Politically Incorrect Guide to Socialism.
Oh.
Never too early to talk about the killing fields of Cambodia. Camellia, where do you think the big driver of this is coming from? I mean, social media is obviously a problem, but pharmaceutical companies, they have a pretty powerful incentive to get people to self-diagnose as mentally ill.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, there is money to be made. I mean, you know, human greed will drive, everything, good or bad. I mean, like we can, in the same sense that capitalism, makes countries wealthy and, a rising tide lifts all boats and all those things, like capitalism also like allows people to take advantage of the negative side of things too. Like it is the trade-off in many ways. And I just think, we're seeing this because it's so much easier to get attention. And, one of the things that Murphy wrote in this article that, really resonated with me. I tried to find the specific quote, but she said, to be specific, I am tired of your labeling of every struggle and character flaw you have as a mental illness with which you will be stuck with for life and that impedes you from doing any normal things that humans have always had to do. And here's the thing, like when, it's been several years ago now, my girls are, no exception to being susceptible to online influence. And, it's hard to, make sure they stay out of, certain circles. So we've dealt with the ups and downs that have come with that. And the one thing that I told them over and over again is like, there is this tendency for everybody want to label themselves with something. Like you have to identify with something. And I told them like, don't ever label yourself, because so many kids, they like decide that they're this thing, whether it's non-binary or whether it's, schizophrenic, no matter what it is, they label themselves with this thing and then they can't get out of it because there's all this social pressure to live up to what they put out there and labeled themselves as. And like, that is so terrible. And I think that's such an important thing that kids need to learn is that you just don't box yourself in, because we grow and change. And it's hard for kids like this, like that video that you played, for them to grow and change because they boxed themselves in and they put it out there publicly to boot.
Faking a mental illness and then getting on prescription drugs is a problem that I don't know if Americans have the courage to face. The drugs problem in the United States is everywhere all at once at all times. You've got probably I won't say that it's the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans are on some drug. But when you combine some of these mind-altering drugs with alcohol, I don't know, Camellia, if you know anybody that's on some of these antidepressants, but I know people who have actual mental illnesses that need to be on them. And then I know people who definitely don't have a mental illness and are on them. And it's like you actually lose the person. They take it, so all of your personality, that everything that makes you, everything that makes you unique, it's not a mental illness in many times. But you know what? Some of these people, it may not just be that they have an incentive to get on drugs, but think about at school how some of these lefty, crazy, administrators and teachers are probably recommending kids to be medicated and potentially destroying their lives because especially the boys.
So I will tell you, I'm a little bit optimistic when it comes to this, because you remember, like, it's probably been 10 years, 15 years ago, where people really, probably maybe more than that, where people really started talking about how that we're putting all these kids on Adderall. And what are we doing? Because like it's like, you've got an attention problem in school. Whoop, send that kid to the doctor. You need to put him on some Adderall. And so I do think like that was so prevalent for so long, but I think we've reached a point where people have started to recognize and acknowledge that in a much more public and pervasive way. And so I'm a little hopeful that we're moving away from that, because people are being so much more loud about it. And you see it come up, even in the legislature when they deal with the public school system and things like that. They're looking at these issues that have been going on in schools for a long time, but are really we've allowed it to just continue because parents have given their kids over to the public school system and just trusted that they would do the right thing. And I you need a community of people. Like as parents, I really feel sorry for people who don't have a good community of people around you, because you need that so much. And it's, it really does, like Hillary Clinton was somewhat right when she said it takes a village, right? I just want it to be my village. Right. But it just, I don't know. I think when you don't have that, and you don't have that support system, you are much more vulnerable to things like that too. And when you give your kids over to, other people and trust that they'll do the right thing, like we are suffering the repercussions of that now. And I don't think that people intended to have that happen with their kids. They thought it was a good thing. It was a helpful thing, but we've become so dependent on it and so little control over it.
How should we react? How are we supposed to react in polite society when someone uses an excuse like saying, I have ADHD? I mean, should we just be allowed, if someone wants to announce their mental illness, shouldn't we be allowed to ask, have you been formally diagnosed by a medical professional?
I mean, they're like, I think it's just become.
Don't you think that if somebody wants to burden us with the knowledge, like, my grandmas, my family members and things like that, if they want to talk to me about their kidney problems, that's fine. But if a stranger or somebody that that I've never spoken to before wants to start talking to me about their mental, not just their mental health, but I mean, like if they were talking to me about like their kidneys or their sphincters, my sphincter's a little loose, okay, Grandpa, I don't really want to hear about it. Why do I need to hear about their mental illness? Unless they actually have one.
And here's the thing, like everybody says, oh, I'm ADD anymore, right? Okay, so it's not that you are ADD, you have ADD, but it's become such a thing that it's kind of like what this lady was talking about in this article, is that if you have trouble focusing or you're easily distracted or whatever it is, like, all of a sudden you have to go get a diagnosis and a medication for that. And they will give you one. Like you can find doctors to do that. A diagnosis for mental illness really is not supposed to be given unless it is causing serious disruption to your life or you are a danger to yourself and someone else. And, our definition of, whether or not it is seriously impeding your day-to-day functions, I think the bar for that has gotten very low when it comes to diagnosis.
Should we bully people who fake mental illness?
So I don't know about the bullying part. I do think, though, that there is value and that it is necessary to do some public shaming, particularly when you have people like this who put this content out online. And, because it is like they've put themselves out there publicly. And if you want to do that, okay, you open yourself up to public criticism as well. And I do think that we should, mock and we should, call those things out because it's like it's out of line. And I think it's damaging.
How should I react when someone tells me they're neurodivergent?
Well. Yeah, I don't know. Like I guess if someone tells me that, I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. Like in what way? Like, what does that mean anymore? I don't even know what that means. Like, does that mean you have autism? Is it something else? Like, I think people say that and they don't know what it means.
Let me tell you something. Some people have gaydar. I can tell somebody has autism. You want to know how I got those skills, how I developed that? I wasn't born with it. But I'm a libertarian, and so no, I shit you not, Camellia. That I've been on the phones a lot, and I've talked to thousands of libertarians. I've run for campaigns, and when somebody walks up to me and starts giving me the monologues, I'm like, oh, that's a real libertarian right there.
Yeah.
And you can't get a word in edgewise. I'm like, that's someone who they are neurodivergent.
Yeah, and here's the thing. If you have ever been around, and I have, people, kids, adults who genuinely have autism, like you can spot in an instant when someone's trying to fake it. Yes. Like there is a huge difference. Like it's pretty hard to fake. Like
I had a phone call with a guy the other day. I don't think he would care that I talk about him. He does these like 6-hour-long streams, and he tags like 100 people in the post that he talks about in the streams. And then sometimes he'll like start screaming, right, for no reason. But then when I called him on the phone, he got really, really, really quiet. And I was just like, oh, that's a real libertarian. He's highly autistic. We've talked about it before. I think Reason Magazine published an article about it, that libertarianism causes autism.
Yes.
And there is something funny because it also correlates with our lack of empathy that we feel, because it's our get off my lawn side of us, the leave me alone side of us.
Sure.
It's deeply autistic in a way. It's like,
don't
touch me. Don't talk to me. Stay away from me. I just want to live on my land and my farm with my animals. And it's deeply misanthropic in some ways. Like, I know a lot of people on our side of the spectrum who they deep down, I can just tell there's much a dislike for people. I know that's not you. But that's there's a spectrum, and that's on it.
Yeah, definitely. Agreed.
Camellia Peterson, you always join us on Tuesdays and Thursdays on the Wake Up America show. I saw this video yesterday about the minimum wage. I think it was Heather Overstreet had appeared, and she had given testimony about how the minimum wage had harmed so many businesses here in Missouri. When they raised the minimum wage, that a lot of business owners got priced out. And, Missouri, for being a red state where all it is, we still got a lot of problems with socialist, with progressive Dems and with progressive Republicans. Supermajority state. Yeah. And yet Republicans just don't seem to understand economics or care.
Yeah, I looked at her page too a little bit yesterday, and she puts out some video content and about Missouri politics and things. And there was a little tidbit that she talked about that I think is like when people talk about, oh, Missouri is such a red state, and you have all these other red states, but then they kind of legislate purple, and you're like, oh, Republicans have been in charge for 20 years, blah, 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 and this is all you've done. And like, but the problem is that we've legislated purple, and this is what she talked about, because your cities are very blue. And so, those high population centers are what, when you talk about minimum wage, when in Missouri, it had to go to a vote of the people, like we passed a minimum, like $15 minimum, like what the heck are we doing? This is supposed to be a red state, right? But it's that empathy problem, right? Because the messaging for that is so emotional in that, oh, single mother raising kids, yada, 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 you need a living wage and you can't make it on, whatever. Like, never mind that nobody's paying $12 an hour anyway, because the market has dictated like more like 16, 17, for starting jobs a lot of times. So anyway, it was good to hear her give that perspective, because when that happens, that's something that's happened across the state, is that, especially in rural areas with these small businesses who are the only ones around to provide jobs, like they get hit the hardest. And so, yeah, that was, I don't know what we're doing here. Somebody texted me yesterday and was bemoaning Republicans' inability to govern and legislate well. And I think and I told you, Missouri, we talk about the national filibuster a lot right now, and it's really annoying because they don't really even have to stand and talk. They can just do whatever, and they have a filibuster, which is no work at all. Well, Missouri has a Senate filibuster, and you do have to stand and talk. And the problem is that if you never cut off debate, you let it's the tyranny of the minority, and they dictate everything. And so, unfortunately, in Missouri, and I don't know why, yesterday, in an effort to appease the Democrats, the Republicans made the way to get past that even more difficult. So. I don't know what we're doing here, but
Camellia, you bless your heart.
Keep pushing me further and further over to just crush them and bowl them over. Like, I don't want to be that way.
Yes,
but you're making this really difficult.
If you only knew the power of the dark side, Camellia. You're about 6 months behind me. Camellia Peterson, liberalism is a mental illness, writes Mosbor. Mental illness is liberalism, and Finkel is Einhorn. Anything that we missed today, Camellia?
Probably not. I'm sure we've offended a ton of people.
Are our lawmakers mentally ill?
No, I just think that there's too much probably of the toxic empathy.
There it is, the toxic empathy. What will we do? What will the poor do if we don't raise their minimum wage? Those stupid little... All right, Camellia, thanks so much. Follow you over on X, @RareCamellia, yes. And I guess we'll see you, thank God it's Thursday. We'll see you next Tuesday. Have a great day.
Yes, have a great day, everyone.
Oh, God! Moving on. Send me to Canada! I'll get her anyone. Wow! 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 Eat the burrito. No. One for you! Woo! Woo!
Drew Van Runkle says, I'm convinced that this is performative. Yeah, she was later outed as being a fake Tourette's influencer. Ticks and Roses, that's what they called her. Yeah, this is a 10-minute compilation here. It's comic.
I have to tell you something. I have a God complex. I just think I'm so pretty. I know I shouldn't admit it, but my manic episode has gotten out of control again.
Okay, that person might actually be mentally ill.
What you know about rolling down in the
If you can blink on the beat, you have ADHD. Okay, yes. No, it's all performative. Wake up, America, because what I'm about to tell you is not a meme or a joke or a silly internet phase. It is a cultural alarm siren, okay? A brand new trend is exploding on TikTok called Chinamaxxing, and it consists of young Americans announcing they are becoming Chinese, not by learning a language that would require actual work, not by studying Confucius say liberalism is stupid, not by opening a business, that would require a lot of work and risk, but by cosplaying a communist lifestyle and declaring open contempt for the United States of America. They drink hot water in the morning. They do Tai Chi in their kitchens. They wear tracksuits and slippers. They eat black sesame soup and post videos saying, "You met me at a very Chinese time in my life." What?
Shanghai. We've been Chinamaxxing all day. Mm-hmm. Feeling like a shoo-shoo. You know what I mean? You're a shoo-shoo. Excuse me.
Yes.
Chinamaxxing over here.
Didn't mean it.
So many of these influencers, though, are not just in on the joke like that one. Many of them are actually praising Chinese culture while denigrating American culture and describing China as a moral and political utopia.
People are Chinamaxxing.
Like, I'm Chinese.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's
I
crazy.
never thought in 2012, if you told me I would be Chinese, I wouldn't believe you. But I'm fully Chinese.
And you talk to like just any white line cook that comes in for a trail now, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know what culantro is. I've worked with that before."
But also just like maybe this is just me being in my bubble, but to me, like, Asian food is superior. Just across the board, Vietnamese, Taiwanese, Chinese, Japanese, like most of the time, that's the food I want to eat.
Cream has risen to the top.
Yeah.
We have a much older, longer cooking culture. And I do think that it has just won out over time, like the techniques, the flavors, the ingredients, like the palate. I think everyone is very well.
So one of the main accelerants of this trend is Hassan Piker, who traveled to Beijing. He streamed from Tiananmen Square and declared he has no patriotism in his heart for America. He called China the most ideal government on earth. He showed an AI image of himself as Mao Zedong while streaming. And even after police intervened with him, Chinese police, to shut him down, he continued praising the regime. This is not organic. This is not just cultural curiosity. This is a generation that has been trained to hate its own civilization and to project its despair onto a totalitarian mirage. So only 41% of Gen Z say they're proud to be an American. Only 26% think America is the best country, and that is not an accident. That is the product of 20 years of anti-American curriculum, deconstructionist media, and online radicalization pipelines. Chinamaxxing is the aesthetic front end of a much darker reality, which is why we need to talk about the back end. The industrialized system China has built for decades to buy Western faces, buy Western voices, and buy Western legitimacy. The white monkey. Let me introduce you to a phrase that has existed for over 20 years. So, white monkey jobs. So that is the term used by Chinese marketers and recruiters to describe hiring Westerners, Westerners to, excuse me, I'm tongue tied, to describe that white Westerners come to China and they become faces or spokespeople of their products and even of Chinese government policies. Take a listen.
Hello, everybody. I am the engineer of Neo Dentech.
For those of you familiar with our channels, you'll probably already know what a white monkey job is, but for those not in the know, a white monkey job is pretty much when you do anything in China for pay other than English teaching.
Walk like a turkey. Walk like a turkey. Walk like a turkey.
Well, even then, these jobs simply rely on the fact that you are not Chinese. It's purely racially motivated, but before you get your noodles in a knot, the name white monkey simply means non-Chinese, and everyone from abroad can find a white monkey job in China regardless of race.
You gotta understand China. You gotta respect China. I tell you now.
We all know how important the concept of face or reputation is in China. In this video, I'm going to go through the categories of white monkey jobs in order from least face to the holy.
So there it is. So they have no real qualifications. Their only job, stand on a stage, wear a mermaid outfit, shake hands, sit at conference tables, be white, and make Chinese companies look legitimate to other foreigners. This is extensively documented by journalists from the BBC, The Guardian, South China Morning Post, and Vice magazine. People have been paid between $100 and $500 per day simply to show up, look important. Some are even given fake titles, like this image you're seeing right now. That was a man who was from the West, who they pretended like he was the CEO of a company so that they could grow it. Some are given fake titles, right, like Director of International Development or Senior Consultant. They read scripts that they don't understand, they smile for photos, and then they leave. One British man told the BBC he was paid to pose as a CEO for a company he had never heard of. An American actor told Vice he was flown to a factory grand opening where he was introduced as a foreign investor, even though he did not know what the company produced. I mean, this is not marketing. This is perception warfare. So China understands something very simple. Westerners trust Western faces. So they buy Western faces. And now fast forward to 2026, the white monkey model has gone digital. Instead of paying some guy to stand in a suit at a hotel conference, they let Western influencers do it for free. TikTokers praising Beijing subways, streamers praising social harmony, YouTubers praising clean streets, all while never showing the surveillance state, the censorship, the political prisoners, the social credit system, the forced labor, the Uyghur camps. These people are not travel vloggers. They are unpaid white monkeys. Or worse, if they are paid, and even if they are, many of these people are being paid to do this without disclosing that they're paid by the government of China. And even if they aren't receiving cash, they are receiving access, visas, perks, translators, fixers, algorithmic boosting. China doesn't need to conquer America with tanks if it can convince America to despise themselves. So here's the trick. Every empire in decline begins by losing faith in itself. Rome did not fall because the barbarians were strong. Rome fell because Romans stopped believing in Rome. Chinamaxxing is not really about tea or Tai Chi or Chinese food or tracksuits. It's about identity replacement. It's a substitute patriotism for people who've been taught that American patriotism is evil, racist, colonial, or oppressive. So they seek meaning somewhere else. And then they land on the most ironic place imaginable, a one-party communist surveillance state. These kids think China is peaceful because they never see protests, they never see riots, they never see dissent, and then they never ask why. They think China is orderly, and they do not understand that order is enforced by force. They think China is harmonious because discord is criminalized. You think that the crackdown in Minnesota is something? Watch the videos from Tiananmen Square. They think China has no homelessness because homeless people are detained, removed, or hidden. They think China has no crime because crime statistics are controlled by the state. Of course, they're mistaking silence for happiness, fear for stability, and censorship for consensus. This is the same psychological trap that has seduced Western intellectuals for a century, from Stalin admirers to Mao apologists to Castro groupies. Every generation produces a new batch of idiots who think that this time communism will be nice. Let's talk about the moral rot at the center of this. These influencers are not naive children. They are economic actors. They are trading national loyalty for internet points, for engagement. They're trading truth for aesthetic. They are trading their country for clout. When you stand in Beijing and declare you have no patriotism for America, you're not being edgy. You're broadcasting to the largest geopolitical adversary on earth that you are available for use. And history tells us exactly what happens to these people. They're celebrated, utilized, and then discarded. They're not members of the Chinese elite. They're props, reusable and replaceable. And the saddest part, many of them think they're part of some global cosmopolitan future, but they're just the latest iteration of paid decor. The white monkey job with a ring light. And I want to say this clearly. You don't have to hate Chinese people to recognize the evil of the Communist Party. You don't have to fear other cultures to defend your own. And you don't have to believe America is a perfect to understand that it is the greatest civilizational engine for human freedom ever created. If ISIS started a streaming service, you'd all call your agents, wouldn't you? Thank you, Ricky Gervais. Why is this happening now? So this is happening because a generation was raised without gratitude, without historical memory, without civic education. They were taught slavery, but not abolition, racism, but not civil rights, imperialism, but not liberty. They were taught that America did wrong, never why the entire world still risked their lives to come here. They were taught that power is evil, but they simultaneously worship the most powerful authoritarian state on earth. This is what nihilism produces. When you teach people nothing is true, everything is relative, and all moral systems are oppressive, they will eventually side with the most confident tyrant. China projects confidence, America projects self-hatred, and the young notice. Oppa Gangnam Style. So let's end with this on this. You're free to drink hot water in the morning. You're free to practice Tai Chi. You're free to eat with chopsticks. But what you're not free is to lie about what China is. You're not free to whitewash a regime built on prisons, camps, censorship, social credit scores, and fear. And you're not free from the moral consequences of selling your country for likes. America does not need to be perfect to be worth defending. It needs citizens who still believe it. And if you're a young person watching me now, here's the truth they will never tell you. You don't need a new identity. You don't need a foreign flag. You need purpose, discipline, meaning, and a civilization worth fighting for. And if you and you already live in one if you're willing to defend it. Stay with me. Highly recommend Ben Sass's The Vanishing American Adult. He talks too about how we stop creating citizens. Kids don't learn appreciation for freedom. Well, in citizenship, the concept of citizenship. The concept of citizenship itself is important. I like this speech from one of my favorite writers and thinkers of the 20th century and slightly in the 21st. Oh, come on.
My fellow Americans. I've waited a long time to say that. It was the 13th of April last, indeed, Mr. Jefferson's birthday and mine. And I took my oath at his memorial on the tidal basin, and I swore particularly to renounce one foreign prince among all the ones I was sworn to abjure, the slobbering Dauphin Prince Charles, who, because of when his mother's demise should occur, God should forbid it, but when it does occur, will become not just the head of the state in my country of birth, but the head of the armed forces and the head of the church. And can't stay married, and can't seem to tell a nice girl from a nasty one, and says that he wants to become a Muslim. This is what you get when you found a church on the family values of Henry VIII. I sometimes think that you, my fellow Americans who came by this naturally and didn't have the strain of going through Homeland Security before putting up your hand, don't know how lucky you are, but it's at least given me a new slogan, to which I invite your attention. When I took my oath to the man who wrote and wanted it among the few things mentioned on his obelisk, the Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom, which becomes the basis of our very precious First Amendment, it occurred to me to say, in honor of his most famous defense of that position, Mr. Jefferson, build up this wall.
Mr. Hitchens. One of my favorite though definitions of citizenship, or the explanations for the importance of citizenship as a concept and teaching it, comes from Victor Davis Hanson.
When you have these woke revolutions, it requires all of us at some point to say, no, not going to do this. A nation has to have civic education. They have to know what the Constitution is. They have to know what the First Amendment is. They have to have some idea who the people were that died at Shiloh, what Okinawa was about, who Andrew Jackson was, who Lincoln was, who Harriet Tubman was. If you don't have models of your past, you're going to forget it. We are living in a country that has no resemblance to the visions of the Founding Fathers in the first 200 years of our history. We're losing that ability with tribal politics, wokeness, cancel culture. If you lose the idea of citizenship, and if Americans don't see themselves as unique citizens of the United States, then you don't have a country. The people who control us in the corporate boardroom, in Hollywood, in professional sports, the people on Wall Street, the people in Silicon Valley, they have found a way to siphon the profits from 7 billion people on the planet that have an iPhone or an email account or a Google search to an area of about 80 square miles. If we don't wake up, the elite who don't believe in the American experiment will hijack our government. If we're aware of what they're doing and aware of the perilous status of citizenship, then we become masters of our own destiny. If we don't, then the citizenship that we've known for centuries will die. I'm Victor Davis Hanson. This is a course on American citizenship. Let's begin.
There you go, Hillsdale College, American Citizenship and Its Decline. Maybe it's you guys would, if you're not into Victor Davis Hanson, maybe this scene will, from a famous movie, will help.
Rico! Rico! Pay attention.
The people watching the Wake Up America show recognize civic virtue, and it wouldn't need to bite Cecilia in the ass. Always a great movie for clips. Hell yeah. Maybe we'll get a little Clendathu drop later. What do you guys say, huh? A little Clendathu drop? Service guarantees citizenship. Dun, 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 dun. All right, Wake Up America. This is one of the most important governance stories of the year, and it goes right to the heart of a question that every taxpayer is asked at some point. Who actually runs this country? The people you elect, we, the people, or people you can't fire? This morning, the Wall Street Journal reports that Trump administration is finally finalizing a rule that will make it easier to discipline and fire up to 50,000 career federal workers in senior positions. Not political appointees, not cabinet secretaries, but career bureaucrats whose jobs focus on executing the administration's policies. Let me repeat that. Executing the administration's policies. For decades, these employees have enjoyed some of the strongest job protections in the entire American economy. They can appeal firings, they can appeal suspensions, they can appeal discipline to an independent board. And the bar for removal is so high that in practice, many of these people are untouchable. The new rule that the Trump administration is laying down, it creates a special category of high-ranking career employees who are policy determining, policy making, or policy advocating. And once in that category, they lose access to the independent appeals board. In other words, they become much closer to at-will employees. Like the political appointees who serve at the president's pleasure, now the left is screaming bloody murder. Of course, they're talking about authoritarianism and purges and political retribution. But before anyone clutches their pearls, Camellia, let's ground this in basic constitutional reality. Article 2 of the Constitution vests executive power in a president, not in a permanent clerk class, not in a lifetime administrative priesthood. The executive branch exists to execute the laws and carry out the president's agenda. If you have thousands of senior career employees who believe it is their moral duty to resist, delay, undermine, or sabotage that agenda, you don't have a functioning republic. You have a shadow government. And the Office of Personnel Management, the OPM, is being very blunt about this. Director Scott Kapoor said, quote, "People can't be conscious objectors in the workforce in a way where it interferes with their ability to carry out their mission. When conscientious objection becomes sabotage or trying to find ways to thwart the objectives of the administration, that is not allowed," end quote. And that statement alone tells you everything. This rule is not about party registration. It's not about who you voted for. It's about whether you're doing your job. And your job, if you're a senior policy executing official, is to implement the elected president's agenda, period. Can I get an amen? Click that like button if you like it. The civil service mythology. Okay, so now the media will immediately run to the history books, and they're going to tell you about the 19th century civil service reforms, how we moved away from a spoils system, how we created a professional bureaucracy insulated from partisan politics. And there is some truth there. The old spoils system was corrupt. One of my favorite reformers, Grover Cleveland, Chester Arthur, it was corrupt. These presidents stepped in to fix that system. The old spoils system needed to be reformed. But here is the lie by omission. Those reforms were never meant to create an unaccountable fourth branch of government. They were meant to create a merit-based workforce. Merit-based does not mean ideologically hostile to the elected government. Merit-based does not mean you get to announce on social media you will resist the president and then dare anyone to fire you. And yet that is exactly what has happened over the last decade. The final rule that the Trump administration is putting out cites examples of behavior that can lead to discipline. And tell me what you think. Does this sound reasonable? Leaks to the media to subvert policy. And it points to a real case, an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission administrative judge who emailed the entire agency shortly after Trump was inaugurated saying, quote, "I will not participate in attempts to target private citizens and colleagues through the recent illegal executive orders," end quote. Think about that. A career judge publicly declaring the president's orders are illegal before any court has ruled and announcing noncompliance. In any normal private sector job, that email gets you walked out of the building the same day. But in the federal bureaucracy, you get protected by layers of procedure, years of appeals, union lawyers. This is why roughly 50,000 positions are being targeted. Out of a total civilian federal workforce of about 2.3 million, only 50,000, right? So we are talking about a small slice, but very high level, very high influence, policy-focused roles. The people who can quietly slow walk regulations, bury memos, lose documents, or leak strategically to friendly reporters. And if you're a libertarian, you should share this. Not because you love big government, but because a government that is internally at war with itself becomes more expansive, more secretive, and more dangerous. When bureaucrats can't be fired, they don't fear the voter. They don't fear consequences. They grow the state to protect themselves. So what this is and what this is not. Chester the Arthur. So let's get very clear about what this rule does and what it does not do. So OPM says employees will not be disciplined based on political party. They will not be asked who they work for. And the rule is not a justification for mass layoffs. It also does not eliminate whistleblower protections. And that matters because the left is claiming this is about squelching dissent. But dissent is not the same thing as refusal to perform your duties. You can disagree. You can privately think the president is wrong. You can even vote against him. But if you're a senior policymaker and you actively undermine the chain of command, you are not a civil servant. You are a political actor hiding behind a civil service badge. So the OPM director, Scott Kapoor, said something else important. If you announce to all your coworkers that you hate the administration and then you perform badly at your job, the fact that you said you're going to resist can be taken into account. Notice the keywords. And then you perform badly. This is performance-based. This is conduct-based. This is not a loyalty oath. This is basic management. And yes, federal unions are freaking out. They warn that the administration could expand the number of positions in this category. And guess what? Congress and the courts still exist. If Trump abuses this, there will be lawsuits. There will be injunctions. There will be political consequences. But we cannot pretend the status quo is working. The status quo gave us bureaucrats who bragged about being part of the resistance. The status quo gave us a national security state that leaks selectively to shape public opinion. The status quo gave us a regulatory empire that continues operating regardless of election results. That is not democracy. That is not even small d democracy. That is soft administrative despotism. And from a libertarian viewpoint, a weak elected executive and a strong permanent bureaucracy is the worst possible combination because you get maximum power with minimum accountability. At least when power is concentrated in elected officials, you can throw them out. You can reverse course. You can pass laws. You can change direction. You cannot vote out a GS-15 lifer. So what's the bigger picture here as we end this today? So this rule fits into a broader project, shrinking the federal workforce, closing programs, firing thousands of employees, offering voluntary separation agreements, and reasserting that the executive branch belongs to the executive. The left calls it a power grab. I call it recognition of reality. The president is elected by tens of millions of Americans. The president is the only position that everybody in the United States votes for. Senior career bureaucrats are elected by no one. If you want a country where policy is set by unaccountable experts with permanent tenure, just say that. Be honest. But don't call it constitutional government because from my perspective, this is not the end game. The end game is radically smaller government, fewer agencies, fewer regulations, fewer employees. But you don't get there by letting a hostile bureaucracy strangle every reform attempt in its crib. This rule that the Trump administration is putting out is a crowbar. It's not a finished house. It opens a door that has been welded shut for generations. And it sends a message. If you take a job to execute policy, you are expected to execute policy, not actively campaign against it from inside the building. That is not tyranny. That is basic organizational logic. Private companies fire people every day for refusing to do their jobs. State governments do it. Local governments do it. Only in Washington is this treated as heresy. So here's the bottom line. This isn't a purge or a dictatorship. It's not the end of the republic. It's a modest step towards restoring the most radical idea in American government, that elections actually matter. And if that idea terrifies the permanent class, good. It should. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Wake Up America show. I hope you enjoyed it today. Hope that you guys will come back tomorrow. Today is Thursday. That means Culturama. Rumble.com/Culturama, where Daniela, the hostess with the mostest, will be covering all the big cultural issues of the day tonight, 7 p.m. Central. Make sure you give it a watch. Also, great news. We are launching a brand new show on the network. Coming next month, March the 3rd, Mylene Salabaria's Cafecito Libre will be launched on the For Liberty Network. That puts us up to 5 shows, 5 live streaming shows. Can you imagine what's going to happen when we take over the whole day Imagine 5, 6, maybe even 7 days a week with live, fresh streaming, Liberty programming, the For Liberty Network. People like Drew Van Runkle, the people who donated today, Amy J.E.'s with her monthly pledge, everybody who's been contributing to that, you built that. You did that. You didn't build that. Yes, you did. Somebody else built that. We built it together. Thanks so much for helping be a part of that, guys. And we'll see you guys right back again here tomorrow on the Wake Up America show and the For Liberty Network.